Hello, and welcome along to the next in this series of videos where we are looking at setting up and configuring Chocolatey within an organization. Now, in the previous couple of videos, we looked at pushing some of the packages that we had within our kind of local folder structure into the Nexus repository, and then also looking at creating a license package for deploying the license onto our machines. Now, where we're going to look at now is we've really got all the pieces in place. We have our we've used our workstation machine to set up and configure our Nexus repository. We've done an installation on another machine, but now we're looking at creating another installation of a client machine, utilizing all of the pieces that we've just put into place. So let's jump in. So looking at the organizational documentation, we're really at step 6, exercise 6. We're looking at installing Chocolatey onto a client machine. So in terms of the setup that I have here, we're getting close now, or we're getting close to that picture that I was using before. So this is my workstation machine. Here I have my Nexus machine. This is where Nexus is set up and running on my machines, on my set of machines. And I've now got a new machine, which is literally a brand new machine. It looks the same, but it's a client machine. It's got nothing on it. I've done the base installation and that's it. There's nothing else on this machine. So what I want to do is I want to get Chocolatey installed on this machine. Now, previously, when we set up our Nexus machine, we had to copy things from one folder to another folder. We ran the local installation script, etc. So there's a couple of hoops we had to jump through, but now that we have the infrastructure in place, we can make that installation much more simpler. So if I go back to my workstation machine, the first thing I want to draw your attention to is that the documentation here is written specifically around using Chocolatey Server, and it's how to utilize Chocolatey Server to do the installation on the client machines. Now, in terms of the videos that I'm creating here, I'm not using Chocolatey Server, I'm using Nexus. So we can't follow these instructions directly, but what I will point you to is this screen. So if you go to if you click this big install now button, it'll take you here to the installing Chocolatey page. And normally you come here as an individual and you simply run this command and Chocolatey will get installed and provisioned onto your machine. But if you look, there is actually an organization tab here that gives us a little bit more information about setting up specifically for Chocolatey within the organization. Now, what we can do is here, or what it wants you to do is it wants you to download the Chocolatey package and put it onto your internal repository. Now, we've already done that, and we can see that over here. So if I come over here and sign in as my account, then we browse and we go to our production repository, then we have the Chocolatey package. We've done that part of the work already. So what the remainder of that installation script, what it wants you to do is it wants you to take the URL, which is this part here. I'm going to copy that, and it's going to put it into this box here. And having done that, it's going to allow me to download it's already taken that URL that I gave it, it's put it into the script, and it's going to give me a Chocolatey install.ps1 file. And what it wants us to do is it wants us to take that script and put it somewhere within our environment that we can make use of it. Now, I'm going to use Nexus for that. So as I mentioned in a previous video, Nexus has the concept of NuGet feeds, Maven feeds, etc. But it also has the concept of a raw repository. It can host and serve just basic raw files, just scripts. So I'm going to utilize a raw repository within Nexus to host that file, and then I'm going to use it to do the client installation on my machine. So before I do that, I'm going to do a little bit of cleanup because I've got some repositories here that I'm not going to use. So I'm just going to clean it up a little bit. I maybe should have done this in a previous video, but I'm literally going to run through my repositories, and the ones that were created for me by default, I'm just going to get rid of them just to clean them up a bit. So the ones I'm going to have left are the test repository, the production repository, and a new one which is going to host my files. So there's a couple other ones here that I'm just going to get rid of. And into that repository, I am going to, as I said, I'm going to put the Chocolatey install.ps1 file that's generated from me from that page. And I'm also going to add one other file into that, and I'll come on to that in a minute. So let's delete this as well. I think I've got maybe one more to go. Yes, let's get rid of this one as well. So delete repository. And having done that, I'm going to click create repository. So again, there's lots of different ones you can pick from, but the one I'm interested in this time around is the raw hosted repository. I'm going to click on that, and the name I'm going to give it, because I am not particularly imaginative, I'm just going to call it the raw-repository. You can call it whatever you want. I'm just going to call it raw repository because that fits with what I've done before. So then if I look at this, the raw repository can house just raw files, PowerShell scripts, EXEs, MSIs. It can host anything that you need it to. So on my local machine, if I go to my C Choco setup folder, I have that chocolatey install.ps1 file. That's the one that I got from this website. I went in here, I put in the URL of my repository, and I downloaded the file that was generated from here. Now the other file I've got is one called client setup, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but let me just get them uploaded. So I clicked on the upload here, and I'm gonna upload these into the repository. Now it's going to ask where you want it to live, so I'm just going to ask it to live in the root of the repository. I'm going to click upload there to get the chocolatey install.ps1 file there, and I'm going to look at the client install one and get that uploaded as well. And once they're both uploaded, we'll take a look at them, because obviously, again, fair warning, these are the first one is one that we've downloaded from a website. You should really look through that and make sure it does what you expect it to. So let's look at the chocolatey install.ps1 file and have a look at what it's doing. So it's taken that URL that I gave it, which was the prod repository, and then what it's going to do is it's going to step through the process of downloading the chocolatey package from that location. It's going to download it onto the machine, it's going to extract it, and then it's going to perform the installation of chocolatey in much the same way as the install.ps1 file from chocolatey.org works. It's just now that we're using it from our own internal repository. So future client installations won't need to reach out to the internet for chocolatey. And because we've downloaded and extracted, downloaded, internalized, and pushed all of the packages that we want into our internal repository, those also don't need to be downloaded from the internet. So the other script that I've got here is a client setup.ps1 file. So this is more, I've kept them separate. So there's a single script that does the installation of chocolatey, and that's all it does. But I've got another script here that I've just called client setup, which is going to do the actual configuration of my particular organization. So in my organization, I want to run out and do the installation of chocolatey. So this script is just shelling out to the other script to do the installation of chocolatey. And then what I'm going to do on that client machine, and this is what we've done before manually when we set up the Nexus machine and when we set up the workstation machine, we added a source so that we could consume packages from that production repository. Now I'm putting it into a script so I don't have to remember to do that every time. We've spoken about how once we have chocolatey set up and we've internalized packages, we don't want client machines having access to the default chocolatey.org repository. So we remove that source, and then we go ahead and disable the chocolatey license feed. So the chocolatey license feed is one that we've spoken about before, and it's the one that once you do the installation of the chocolatey extension, it will create that chocolatey license feed, which is where it will consume the licensed artifacts from. If you try and delete that or remove that source, chocolatey will put it back in again. So the recommendation is to go ahead and disable it. And then, having done those things, we will install our chocolatey license package. So the end result of that is that our client machine will have a licensed version of chocolatey installed on it. We'll go ahead and install chocolatey GUI, the UI interface for accessing chocolatey. We'll install the chocolatey extension, so we get a fully licensed version of now that we have the license installed, we can install the licensed extension that goes with that. The slight difference to how we've done the installation here compared to where we've done it before is I've added in a package parameter that says no context menus. Now the reason for that is on the workstation machine, if I were to find a nupkeg file or an exe, chocolatey extension brings with it things like package builder, running package builder, and what's the other one I'm looking for? There's another one that it does. You right click and you say package builder being the main one, but you can also run a Choco push from directly a right click on a file. These are things that we do as operations people. Those are the operations that we want to take advantage of and utilize Chocolatey for. On a client machine, it's more about the installation of packages, not the utilization of the business features of Chocolatey per se. So I'm saying here, don't add those context menus as part of the installation. And then the final one here is the installation of Chocolatey agent. Now, we haven't really spoken about that yet in some of these videos, but I'm going to get it onto the client machine so that in a future video, we can talk around using Chocolatey agent to provide self-service installations. So with all of those things done, we should be able to run the client installation of Chocolatey and all that configuration on our client machine. So I'm just going to copy this URL, copy this line of code here, and I'm going to bring up my Chocolatey client machine. So this is my Chocolatey client machine. If I open in PowerShell window, I'm just going to paste what's on my clipboard, and it's obviously not quite right because it didn't. Let me paste it again. I just want to get something so I can start editing it. So it's not called Chocolatey install, it's the client setup.ps1 file that I'm interested in. And the repository that I'm going to pull it from is my Nexus :8081 repository, which is where it lives, and then the raw repository, which is where that script lives. So what this one line of PowerShell is doing is it's setting the execution policy, as we've done before, and it's going to download and it's going to execute the contents of this PowerShell script. So that's the client setup.ps1 file that we're just discussing. So what this is going to do is everything that we were doing manually before. So the end result of this script running on this machine is Chocolatey is installed. We have a license file deployed onto the machine. We deploy the Chocolatey extension. So we get all of the Chocolatey for Business functionality onto this machine. And then we'll also install, and we'll pre-install some of the packages that we want onto this machine. So it's often doing that stuff. And so there it's setting up the prod Nexus source so that we can start to consume packages. It's removed the Chocolatey source by default. It's going to disable the Chocolatey license feed. And then it's going to, now we're at the point where it's installing the packages. So it's going to lay down the Chocolatey license.xml file that we did manually before. It's then going to install Chocolatey GUI, and it's going to do everything that was in that client setup. Now, the red text that we had here, that's the chicken and egg problem that we've also spoken about in a previous video, is that now that we've laid down the Chocolatey license.xml file, we haven't as yet installed the Chocolatey extension. So it's basically warning us that there's a Chocolatey license file without a Chocolatey extension being in place. So it's warning us that that's the problem. So that's nothing we need to worry about just now. As soon as the Chocolatey extension gets laid down, it will take care of that for us. But the whole purpose in that client setup.ps1 file is that's our opportunity to configure the machines in the initial kind of setup with exactly what we want installed. So I just kind of picked a few of them there just to get some things laid down on the machine. But as we work through our videos here, we're going to do a little bit more configuration work, and we're probably going to lay down a couple of other packages to go with the ones that we've included here. Mainly because we haven't quite got to where I want to get to yet, which is, we go back to that diagram right in the start of the first video. We spoke about having a CCM server where Chocolatey clients were checking into. So we haven't set any of that up yet. So I haven't looked at setting up any of the configuration to make that happen. So what we'll end up doing is we'll probably come back and we'll make a modification to the client setup.ps1 file that we have just now. And we'll start to add in that additional work to have these machines checking into our CCM, our Chocolatey Central Management Machine. So there's a little bit more work to do, but essentially what we've got here now, once this is literally just on the cusp of finishing, we've now got a single line of PowerShell that is using all of the new infrastructure that we have, to lay down a complete installation of Chocolatey on a client machine. And whereas before we had kind of manual steps to go through, we did those manual installations or we copied the files over, all of that has been removed now, and it's all been done based on the infrastructure that we have. So here, if I do a Choco source, I can type. If I do a Choco source list, let me just make this PowerShell window a little bit bigger. So the only source that we have available now is our internal production repository. We've removed the Chocolatey org source, which we spoke about. And if we were to do a Choco list of that source, we would see that 12 or so packages that we have available to us on that feed just now. But in the next couple of series of videos, we'll be looking at how we can populate additional packages into that feed for consuming and placing onto these machines. So let's just let that finish. It's taking a little bit longer than I would have expected. There we go. Like I said, the downfall of trying to have multiple machines running on the same host machine is that the end result is that they're a little bit slower. So this is the third machine I've now got running on my host machine. There'll be a couple more by the time we finish. So that's there. And if we just run Choco, obviously, we know that we've got the business edition. So everything's been laid down for us. And it all the packages and installation came from this Nexus machine that we have set up. So that entire installation happened without reaching out to the internet at all. Everything has been downloaded, internalized, and set up on this machine without reaching out to the internet whatsoever. So again, we spoke about in a previous video about some folks need to have a complete air-gapped network installation, and this is what drives that functionality. We've internalize all those packages. We've put them on a shared Nexus repository that we can then consume that package installations from, and it's all done utilizing Chocolatey. So hopefully this was useful to you. In terms of the organizational setup, we've essentially finished this now. These documentations start talking about what you can do in terms of utilizing configuration management systems to help with the laying down of these bits. So if you need to use Ansible, Chef, Puppet, Salt, etc., there's some documentation around that as well. And the last part that I want to call out here is in terms of the Chocolatey components that we create and when we release new ones, there is a mailing list, the Chocolatey Announce mailing list. So I would encourage you to subscribe to that. It's an opt-in. We only put information about releases of Chocolatey components onto that. You're not going to get spammed with it, but it's a great way of finding out and being made aware of when new components of Chocolatey are available. And that, in terms of this documentation, this is where we draw to a line. We're done. We've got all the main components of Chocolatey and organization setup. So what we're going to look at next, there is another how-to here. So there's a how-to over here with regard to how to automate package internalizer. So right back at the start when we were looking at downloading those base 12 or 13 packages that we have, we were using package internalizer. What we want to do next is we want to automate that process, and that's where using something like Jenkins, which is what I'm going to use, a CI/CD platform, to perform that automation. So that's where we're going to go next. We're going to look at installing, configuring, and setting up Jenkins, and then we're going to look at the different jobs that you can execute to both keep your internal repository up to date based on what's available on chocolatey.org, but also how you can download and internalize new packages into there. And once we've got that set up, then we're going to look at setting up and configuring. Let me find it in here. Let me find what I'm looking for. We're going to look at setting up and configuring Chocolatey Central Management. So that's where we're going to install and set up a database server, a service server, and a web server, which will give us the full CCM installation. And all these machines that we currently have in our infrastructure will start reporting into CCM, and we'll be able to start collecting information on those machines. And then we'll also be able to trigger deployments from CCM onto those machines. So that's in future videos. As I've said before, if there's any questions about any of this, feel free to reach out in the comments below, or reach out on Twitter. I'm happy to answer any questions, and hopefully this is useful to you. Thank you very much.